how's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Good, very good, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you guys about stopping animal testing on cosmetics and medical experiments. It was a topic that interested me a lot. I have a lot of animals myself, and I think it's super cool, and it definitely opened my eyes to just things that I use every day. So, now we're going to, it's our lovely audience.
There.
I don't think you got me.
You didn't get Joey. Joey, you got like your chin.
Okay,
Oh.
so it would probably surprise you that over 25 million animals are used in biomedical experiments, products and cosmetic testing, and science education. That's a huge amount if you just think about it. And a lot of these animals we don't even, think about, like mice and rats, and those ones are even specifically bred in laboratories just to be tested on. So it's pretty sad. These animals suffer very cruel treatment and oftentimes fatal treatment when they're getting tested on, and it doesn't really matter. They just whatever, they're experimented on, that's what happens. And it even is, besides chimpanzees, the animals, if they're done with being experimented on, they are allowed to be euthanized up to the laboratory staff. So my solution is to fight against this problem and advocate. I would like to advocate for a law that protects all animals, especially the ones beyond the Animal Welfare Act, which are mice, rats, birds, fish, and reptiles. Those guys aren't included in that, so they're excluded, and I want to fight for a law that covers all of this. And we can start by joining organizations that support it, and also to just stop using products that test on animals. So today in this speech, I'm going to go over why it's tested on animals in the first place and the effects it has on it, and then tell you guys how we can advocate against that. So, first we'll start out. As I mentioned before, testing on animals causes huge consequences. They have a lot of torturesome treatments. They're tested their eyes, all their body, their skin is burned, fatal accidents, their spinal cords are crushed, just terrible, terrible things, paralysis, and that's just awful. Not to mention the way that they live in these laboratories is confined in a cage. That's no way to live for any animal. So first we ask, why is this used on animals in the first place? Well, people think, they don't want it to be tested on humans. They're like, we might as well, test it on people or on animals first. These are just going to be some images that show you. This is a picture that I got directly from PETA, which does a lot on animal testing. As you can see, the bunny is in a cage. Its eyes are pretty swollen, so it's just not good. Again, that's basically how they're kept, is in a cage. There's some kittens you can see there. So they don't want it to use on humans. So they also think animals have very similar systems to humans, similar organs, some similar reactions. That's all very similar. So they think by testing on animals, they can do that. But actually, we found out the Journal of American Medicine Association published an article finding that a lot of medical treatments developed in animals did not actually translate into humans. So
We'll have to edit that out.
there's a huge difference there. And also animals are similar, but they do differ biologically. So it's not going to be the exact same result as it is on a human. Now we move on to the effect it has on animals, which is very heartbreaking. As I mentioned before, some of the things that can happen, they're already traumatized by living in a small cage. They're not around other animals. They have very little human contact. That's very hard. And then the damage they receive for being tested on. There are 4 major different kinds of testing. We have toxicity testing, immobilization, transplanting, and genetic engineering. Toxicity, oftentimes they're fed something every day, different types that can be tested up for a whole year on these animals every single day with no recovery period. And if it doesn't lead to death, then they're oftentimes very sick afterwards. Immobilization is also extremely cruel. They immobilize parts of the body, they shock them, especially rats and mice are hung up by their tails, put in tubes. They're put in water to see if they can not drown. It's very, very sad. Transplanting issues, obviously, different cells, different from different organs, from different species, extremely dangerous. And genetic engineering, as you can imagine, putting different genes into something that doesn't belong causes a huge effect. Lots of abnormalities and just lots of problems for these poor animals, and they can't do anything about it. They don't have to say so in it. So now I ask you, now that we know these terrible effects, what's the solution? Well, first of all, we can start by not using products that do test on animals. It's very easy to find on PETA. They have a site that shows you all of these brands. I actually pulled some up here. All of these are just some examples of some of the brands that are not tested on animals. And sometimes some websites you can even ask what products are not tested. So that's just to start by not contributing money to these companies that test on them, especially the cosmetic companies. You can volunteer places that, like organizations like PETA or Humane Society and fight against this. And the more awareness we cause, the more it's going to be noticed and pushing towards a law that doesn't allow this. Now I say, well, if we can't test on animals, then what's an alternative? Cell cultures, human tissue, computer models, volunteer studies, and human medical breakthroughs are all great alternatives that are probably going to be more accurate than testing on animals anyway. Cells are grown in labs nowadays that are actually like human cells, and that's going to be way better testing, and that's just one of the many alternatives that we can use that will also be more accurate. Just imagine your own animal, God forbid something happened, you had to put them up for adoption, or they got lost. They could be one of these animals ending up in these laboratories being tested on. How does that make you feel? Any animal could happen to any of them. You could see it be your friend, yours, you see in a shelter, you see on the street, and then the ones that are actually bred for this, which is heartbreaking. So now at the end of this speech, I ask you all to take a pledge with me, now that we've gone over why it's used on animals, the terrible effects it has, and also the alternatives we can do against it. I ask you to take a pledge with me against testing animals on cosmetics and medical experiments by starting to use as many products as you can that do not test on animals, by volunteering with an organization, and just getting the word out there. So I ask you all to pledge that with me. Do you all accept that?
Yep.
No.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So now that you have some information about that, I ask you to move forward, and thank you so much for listening with me tonight.
You're welcome.